Hello and welcome to a brand new Arseblog Arsecast right here on arseblog.com. How are you? Hope you're well. Thank you very much indeed, as always, for being here. We're carrying on our tradition. Can you call it a tradition? I don't know if it's tradition is the right word, but doing our post-game Arsecasts for you the day after the game. Tradition is more like when everyone in the village wears a strange costume with a goat mask and two hikers who happen to pass by stop at the local inn for some sustenance and then find themselves in a horrific situation where they're put inside a giant basket and set on fire while all the goat mask people dance around singing a really terrible, creepy song. This usually happens on Halloween, as you know. That is the more traditional definition of tradition, if you know what I mean. This is just more a change of schedule. Anyway, we're here, and it is the morning after our 1-0 defeat to Inter Milan in the Champions League, a game which I think has some interesting aspects to it. There's the context of our recent run of fixtures and results and performances, which have not been particularly great. But then there's also the context of playing the Italian champions away from home and the way I think this game was decided on very, very fine margins. So let's get into it. And with me to do that this morning is Phil Costa. Hello, Phil.
Morning, Andrew. How are we doing?
Doing all right.
Voice crack there. Again, I don't know why my voice always cracks when I say that. It's like a...
You're emotional. That's what it is. How you doing?
Just,
How you doing?
Yeah.
I'm fine. The morning after a defeat again, my voice is gone. No, it is an emotional morning. We've lost again. November doing November things to Arsenal, which, you know, you have to say is Arsenal heritage. Nevertheless, a defeat in the Champions League after defeat in our last game against Newcastle, ahead of a game against Chelsea this weekend, not leaving anybody feeling particularly great, even if I think in this particular tournament there is obviously a bit more margin for error because of the amount of games and the fact that it's a big table and you can still qualify even if that means a couple of extra fixtures. So let's get into this, because I think there's some interesting aspects to this game, to this performance, particularly coming as it did after a really bad display against Newcastle. And I won't say that there weren't shades of that in this Arsenal performance, but I think by and large, the Newcastle adjacent elements of this performance were very much in the first half. I think there was improvement in the second half. We can get into that. Let's start with the team. It was obviously pretty strong. Ben White was back. Merino and Partey in midfield in the absence of Declan Rice, as you would expect. No change in the forward line, so to speak, which I get that might frustrate people to an extent because it didn't really work against Newcastle. It wasn't great. It hasn't been great of late, so you're looking for Mikel Arteta to change something, but there's not a huge amount on the bench that would give you a great deal of faith in that respect anyway.
No, it's really weird because we're just in a real funk at the moment. You know, 2 wins in our last 6, 3 defeats in that time. And I know it's been a rough schedule, fixture-wise, but we're not playing particularly well. And we just look a bit tired. Everyone just looks a bit lethargic and tired. And like you said, if we were looking for some inspiration from maybe those who haven't been involved recently, I think of a Jesus, I think of a Sterling. It's just not coming from them. And, you know, we can get into that later. And I think Sterling is a discussion to be had on its own. But we're just a bit flat. So it didn't surprise me that he kind of went with the same thing, even though the Trossard-Havertz combination has looked a bit stale. Martinelli, a bit isolated. I just didn't see any scope for change, really, or something that would have given us something extra or different. Yeah,
I mean, there is maybe one possible change that he could have made, which is to play someone like Ethan Nwaneri. But again, we're having this discussion about the need for a player like him, caveating that discussion with, you're playing away in the Champions League against a very, very good Inter Milan side. And I think this should be a through line of this discussion. that we can be disappointed with the result, frustrated with elements of the performance, but I don't think it does anybody any good to dismiss Inter as, we should go and we should beat them. They're the Italian champions. They won it by a lot of points last season. They've yet to concede a goal in the Champions League this season. They are a very good side. So let's at least have that as the foundation for the discussion. So while I'm with you on Jesus and Sterling, it's like, well, I understand changing something and wanting to change something, but if those are the options available to you right now, I can sort of also understand why you didn't. To change the dynamic, you could bring somebody like Nwaneri in, somebody with those skill sets, but he is just 17 years of age, and it's a lot to ask to put him in from the start against a team as good as Inter Milan, who I think it's fair to say started the game very well, very brightly. They had a couple of early pops at goal. One we got away with, I think, when Dumfries hit the bar. I don't know that we did too much wrong in that situation. It's a great effort. Hit the bar, bounced away, and then there was another one from Çalhanoğlu a little bit later on, about 4 minutes in, and they'd had a couple of chances. So, you can understand why there is a reluctance to use Nwaneri at this moment in time, but also you can see why there is a clamor for a player like that to give the team a different dynamic.
Yeah, definitely. We're in such a difficult position with him now because we can all see the talent and how he would come into this team and potentially give us something different. I think the last couple of weeks in particular have exposed us in an attacking sense, in a forward sense, in how we build our play, the relationships we are able to put onto the pitch haven't quite been there. And it's super tempting. I would have liked to have seen more of him during this Ødegaard absence. I think he maybe deserved a bit more than 10 odd minutes yesterday, but also I'm fully aware that he is just 17 and that he hasn't played a huge amount in senior football, be that the Premier League or the Champions League. But then I can also see that Lamine Yamal and Pau Kubasi are playing every week for Barcelona. So it's really difficult. I'm so reluctant to put too much on him at the moment, but also I don't think he wouldn't be here if Arteta trusts him and wants to use him. So,
it occurred to me, Phil, we've sort of framed the Nwaneri stuff in the absence of Martin Ødegaard, and people thinking, well, when the captain's not there and we need that kind of creative player, and I don't think we need to have the discussion about whether or not we're a creative player or too light in midfield, because I think that's obvious we are. Without Ødegaard, there is a big drop-off, a big deficit. But this idea, which, I understand as well, we haven't seen as much of Nwaneri as we would like in the absence of Ødegaard. It struck me last night that maybe the thing to get this team going in a different direction is, now that we have Martin Ødegaard back to a certain extent, early days still, but he did make his a comeback last night for 5-6 minutes towards the end, that I wonder if Nwaneri and Ødegaard in tandem might be a way of getting him into the team on a more consistent basis, because you have that security alongside him. We know that Ødegaard has been sort of mentoring Nwaneri behind the scenes, that, there are similarities in terms of how they made their breakthroughs at a very, very early age. 15 to make your professional debut is very rare, right? So we know they've got this relationship. I just wonder if, when Mikel Arteta thinks about how does he get Nwaneri into the team, if you have Ødegaard alongside him to be that senior figure, to be the technical security around him, to, I don't want to say coach him through games because he's got his own job to do, but to use all of his experience, the idea of Nwaneri and Ødegaard in a midfield behind the front three, to me, is very captivating. And I wonder if it might be something that we see, or maybe that's me clutching at straws, but I just wonder if it's a possibility down the line that if the Havertz, Trossard, Jesus, Sterling thing doesn't work the way we want it to, what else do we have?
It's absolutely a possibility, and I don't think anything at this point of the season can be scoffed at or ruled out. I mean, the most of the conversation around Nwaneri has been about him deputising for Ødegaard as the right 8. But why can't he be coming into the side as the left 8? I mean, he played there during pre-season. He played well against Manchester United in that position. He got the assist for Jesus, I think, making a nice overlapping run in the half space. So, look, I'm open. I'm open to these possibilities. It's clear that just an impetus of something, some creativity, that ability to play on the half turn. You know, there was that gorgeous spin away from Davide Fratesi, I think, in the final stages, where you just thought, "Ooh, there's something."
That's what we're looking for. That's what we need. Just, because it's so. It feels a bit prescribed in the final third, like what we did last night. We'll come to it in the second half, but just that player or an other player or both players at the same time with the ability to move away from an opposition player to do something a little bit different that they're not expecting. You can be very, very secure in possession, but not at all threatening. It's those movements and those abilities to find space, to fire a shot, which, was over the bar. He hit it with venom over the bar, but I really, really enjoyed just how different it was from most of what we'd seen from Arsenal, not just in that game yesterday, but against Newcastle too.
Completely, and especially a trend that I've been seeing in, not only this season, but there were spells during last season as well. Was the mid block seems to be becoming our kryptonite. Yeah, I think we can play when the game is kind of a basketball game, when both teams are in transition. I think we can break down a low block. I think eventually we can just sustain enough pressure to get those done. But the mid block, we are really struggling. We're really struggling with the mid block at the moment. And I think it's purely because we don't have that style of player at the moment through a lack of recruitment, and also Ødegaard being injured. We've let Smith Rowe and Vieira go, of course, who are the kind of the next best thing, or were the next best thing for those areas, just in and around the box, to take the ball on the half turn, to pick the lock, to have a combination with someone, bounce a wall pass off somebody, and we're being nullified. And just seeing Nwaneri being able to do that in a split second was really encouraging. And it just shows again what we've kind of been missing over the last few weeks. But again, there's just a huge caveat about him and his inclusion, although I see it from another perspective as well, that if he's here, why shouldn't he be considered? I think he's more than good enough and rated enough to be considered. Maybe not to start every game, but to give him 45, to give him half an hour. So
yeah, I mean, if the team is playing,
it's a tough one.
If the team is playing with the handbrake on a little bit, to use an old familiar phrase, is it true maybe that sometimes Mikel Arteta manages with the handbrake on? And look, we can all acknowledge he's got more information about his players than we do, etc., etc. But, as you point out, at other clubs and big clubs as well, there are young players playing on a consistent basis because they have the talent to be in the first team squad. So if they're in the first team squad, then why can't they play games, or play more part in games at least?
Yeah, I mean, just what did you make of the attack generally? I know some people might not think this, but I saw it as an improvement on Newcastle at least. I know the bar was low, but I did see a bit more from us than what we showed at St. James's Park. Just what do you think is the issue, or how do you think we turn this around?
I think the first half was very similar to what we saw against Newcastle. To my mind, and I've been chatting with people on Arseblog on the Arses today about this, where I thought the second half was better. I'm not saying it was brilliant, but I think the second half was markedly better than the first half and anything that we did against Newcastle. I think we pretty much dominated that entire half. And look, you can say, and rightly so, with that amount of domination, did we make enough chances? Did we cause them enough problems? And the answer is no, probably not. But was it better than the first half? Yes. Was it better than Newcastle? Yes. There were moments, I think, where on another night we get a goal. And we're talking about Arsenal responding pretty well against a very good Inter Milan side. We've come away with a decent away point, and I think our I think our perception of the performance is a little bit different. But of course, you don't get that goal, and it's a different discussion. I also think, to a large extent, actually, I'm not quite sure how to frame this because I don't want to insult anyone's intelligence. But I think in the second half, no, genuinely, in the second half, were you watching on TNT Sport?
I was, yeah.
Right. They just kept going on and on and on and on about how bad it was from Arsenal, just non-stop. And I don't agree that it was that bad. I agree there are things we could have done better, but I also think that when you're hearing time and time and time again on commentary, Arsenal, they need to do this, they need to do that, they need to do the other, you sort of come away with that impression of the game when in reality, in that second half, the way Arsenal dominated the game, I think was certainly a big improvement on the first half and certainly a big improvement on what we saw against Newcastle. Again, the question about, do we have enough firepower? Do we have enough cutting edge? Are we clinical enough? No, I don't think anybody can argue with that. But I also think you have to look at the performance sort of in isolation. I know we're trying to contextualize all this in a period where things are not going well. We're not playing very well. There are concerns about the way we're attacking. But if I'm looking at that 45 minutes, I thought it was certainly improved on what we've seen of late, you know. How we fix it, how we go about improving it, how we get those goals that we need, that's the $64,000 question. I don't really have the answer other than to try and change the dynamic of the team a little bit, which, as I've said to you, could come from Odegaard, it could come from Nwaneri, or Nwaneri and Odegaard, I don't know, but I really do feel like at this moment in time, we're sort of trying to do the same things over and over and over. They're not working, and I'm not sure we can kind of blunderbuss our way through this without changing something within the team structure or the tactical side of it. What about you?
Yeah, well, I think the numbers speak for themselves. 20 shots in last night's match, the most without scoring in a single Champions League game since November 2006, when we had 23 against CSKA Moscow. We attempted 46 crosses.
There's a talking point.
In any match under Mikel Arteta. Funnily enough, the only match where we attempted more was the 3-2 win over Bournemouth, the Reece Nelson game. So, but just in general, our last away goal from open play in the Premier League and the Champions League was back in September, Calafiori's goal against Man City. So
yeah,
for me, it just goes back to our squad building and the chronic lack of investment in attack. We failed to score 5 times in the league last season, despite breaking our goal scoring record. And particularly in Europe, I thought we lacked offensive power, transitional threat, someone who could scare and occupy defenders. That wasn't called Bukayo Saka. And we didn't really respond to that in the transfer market. We bought Mikel Merino, again, a very functional midfielder when maybe there were other profiles available in that position. But also we left it till the last day of the season to loan in Raheem Sterling, who, granted, was a potential market opportunity at that point, but was someone who had fallen completely out of favour at Chelsea and didn't really have a proper pre-season. So just even attacking options aside, we said it before, we don't really have the players who can welcome the ball in those tight spaces. Our distances feel a bit off in this current system. I don't know why our wingers are so isolated all the time. Saka just feels every time he gets the ball, there's 2 or 3 players on him and no Arsenal player within a 50-yard radius. The same with Martinelli. So it's quite damning that I just don't watch us at the moment, especially when we need to come back from behind and expect us to score or feel like we're going to score. Whereas for the past 2 seasons, I have generally felt like that. I'm not saying all the time, but more or less we do seem to create or sustain waves of pressure. And I know there was a header cleared off the line yesterday. I know Havertz had a couple of chances. There was one incredible block that was definitely going in from Bisek. But just generally, the reason we are attempting so many crosses is because we just don't want the ball in those central areas. I tweeted it yesterday. Those kind of zones outside of the penalty area are where our attacks go to die. It's just like a black hole. we don't go anywhere near them, and the mid blocks just negate us too easily. So it's a bit of a shame because we look so flat. We look just out of ideas, flat, and it just seems to be a funk that we're in that we can't just claw our way out of. Although I'm ready to acknowledge that some things have gone against us as well.
Yeah. I think if we didn't have bad luck, we'd have no luck at the moment. And that is sort of evident in some of the incidents in the second half. But I tend to agree with you about the attack. Like, I think we have, over the course of the last couple of seasons, genuinely improved. When you look at the amount of goals that we've scored, and I think you point out those games we didn't score in, and certainly there was a feeling, let's say, after the Bayern games last season that Arsenal needed something more in attack, not just in the Premier League, but in Europe. You know, a different kind of threat, maybe, whether that was a pace or whether that was somebody a bit more physical. But it was widely acknowledged, and I think within the club itself as well, that there was an improvement to be made there. Do
you know when we scored our last away goal in the Champions League?
Was it against PSV?
It was, yeah. Eddie Nketiah against PSV in the group stages last season. So
there you go. There you go.
I think there's definitely a conversation to be had about our away record because, again, scoreless here at Inter. We failed to score at Bayern and Porto last season and Atalanta again this season.
Yeah.
It's a theme.
It is a theme, and it's a problem, and it's one that absolutely needs to be fixed. And I think what's happened probably is that the improvements that we have made, you know, we've missed some key players this season. You know, Martin Odegaard key amongst them, but other players have not been anywhere near as productive as we would need them to be. And that includes Gabriel Jesus, that includes Gabriel Martinelli, Bukayo Saka, I got no issue with. I think his end product is excellent, but too many players are not delivering what we need them to deliver within the structures and within the tactical setup that Mikel Arteta has implemented in the absence of Martin Odegaard. I do think that the summer transfer window was a missed opportunity in terms of getting somebody in. Could we have taken that risk on someone like Pedro Neto, who gives you just that pace, that burst on both sides? Could we have pushed the boat out for a striker? Maybe. I don't really understand. And, you know, without the knowledge as to what was going on behind the scenes, I don't really understand how you get to the final day of the transfer window and Raheem Sterling is the option that you have available to you, right? That doesn't speak to me of a particularly well-planned window. I think we've seen over the last couple of games what Mikel Arteta thinks of Raheem Sterling right now. I'm not saying that Raheem Sterling can't contribute or won't contribute over the course of this season, but we needed a goal against Newcastle. He did not get on the pitch. We needed a goal against Inter. He did not get on the pitch. Trossard is not playing at his best at this moment in time. Martinelli, not scoring. Jesus, not scoring. I think Havertz was by some distance our best player last night. I thought he
was good last night.
I thought the way he ran the channels, the way he held the ball up to give us an outlet was excellent. His movement was good. His passing was good. He had a couple of chances, which we'll come to in a moment. But beyond that, you don't have anything on the bench. You have nothing really on the bench. You know, Jesus came on at halftime and you're like, please? You know, it's sort of like
poking him with a stick.
It's exactly. Do something. It's sort of like crossing your fingers rather than being truly hopeful. And I think he was lively. I think he ran around. I think he gave us a little bit of zip. But did he give us any goal threat? I don't think so. So there is, you know, a big issue for the manager to address. There's a long way to go before January. And I don't think it's likely that anybody's coming in on January the 1st either. So there's a lot of football to play between now and then. So as we said earlier, he does have to find a solution with what he's got. And that means, to me anyway, accepting that certain players in certain positions are not delivering what he needs them to deliver right now and finding a way to get either different players in different positions or tweak the way that we're playing to allow maybe even just to sort of not confuse the opposition, but to make us a little less predictable for the opposition, because I think right now you can look at Arsenal and you can look at the way we play and feel, if you're the opposition, relatively comfortable in the idea of what you have to do to prevent Arsenal scoring and getting chances. I'm not saying you don't have to work to do that, but I don't think you're going to be looking at Arsenal at this moment in time and thinking, right, what are they going to do? How are they going to surprise us? I don't think that's part of what's going on right now. Yeah.
I think there was an acknowledgement that the second half was an improvement last night, but also there's a part of me that also has to admit that Inter were comfortable surrendering that territory and possession because they were confident in their ability to defend. So I don't think they ever really felt under threat or stretched by Arsenal. Yes, they had to head out a mass of crosses and set pieces they dealt with well generally. But they conceded a lot of the ball in the territory because they were comfortable defending against us. So I think there are triggers and ways of playing that you can nullify Arsenal. And the horseshoe of death is starting to reveal its ugly head again, although I don't think we can underestimate the return of Martin Odegaard and what that could potentially bring to us, because he's just so important, so important to how we play, to how we pick the locks, how we build up on that right side, how we press. And it really wouldn't surprise me to see him start at Stamford Bridge on Sunday, to be honest.
No, me neither. We'll come back to that. I mean, I take your point. I think it's a classic way for an Italian side to approach a game when they're 1-0 up, when they're as good as Inter are, and when they're as comfortable defending the way they are. I had a look at this. They made 38 clearances. They're back 5. The 3 centre-halves and the 2 wing-backs in total made 38 clearances from corners and from free kick, from crosses that we put in. With a lot of crosses. I think Bukayo Saka had 19 crosses. Gabriel Martinelli, 13. I mean, Martinelli ended up with 5 key passes in this game because chances did come from some of those crosses. But for the most part, you know, it was, I'm not going to say meat and drink for Inter, but it is a case of, right, okay, we know how to do this. This is a strength of ours. Come break us down. And we couldn't do that in part because we've already spoken about the lack of something different when you get into that final third. I mean, the fact that Nwaneri's turn and shot, you know, was on the edge of the D basically. I mean, we had nothing from there all game. So that was maybe something that we could have troubled them with a bit. I do take your point, and I saw people say, well, Inter rested half their team. They also brought on Barella, and they brought on Thuram, and they brought on Mkhitaryan, and they brought on Dimarco, who've been key players for them this season. It didn't really change anything. Like, I don't... No. You could say it's a potato thing when it comes to Inter let Arsenal have the ball or Arsenal didn't let Inter have the ball. Like, I don't think that they wanted to play quite as defensively as they did. I think the way that we controlled the second half wasn't the way they would have liked it to go. I think Saliba on Thuram was excellent. Like, Thuram just couldn't get anywhere near the ball. We dominated in that respect. So I do take your point. I also think it doesn't maybe give us some of the credit for the second half display that we deserve, because Inter did try and change it and nothing much changed. I think they had 1 shot. Let me just have a look at the possession stats in the second half. 71%. And again, I know that's, some people will say that's a meaningless stat when you don't score goals, but it does illustrate the way that we played in the second half without making that breakthrough. So, you know, again, the context of the game, the context of the opposition, I think it does play a part in how I view that second half. Like, and just let me be clear, I'm not saying there isn't room for improvement. Clearly there is. Clearly there are issues with this team right now and the way it's playing. But I do think in isolation, that second half was a lot better than we've seen from Arsenal in the last, in the 3 previous halves, if you like, the first half here and the 2 halves against Newcastle, which were just not good.
Yeah. Look, I'm with you. I think the bar was low, but it was undoubtedly an improvement. And I think, again, just to go back to this Champions League format, I know we've spoken about it before, but it really does take away some of the feeling and jeopardy with these games. I think in terms of our 8 fixtures, this is probably the hardest one we've got. And in a normal 4-team group, this would have been a big game and quite a disappointing defeat against the team who would likely have been our main rivals for top spot.
Yeah.
Inter were pot 1. But even in the context of this horrible run, it didn't feel overly disastrous. And I'm sure our schedule will give us the opportunity to right this wrong. And that's not me taking Sporting for granted. For example, we've struggled away in Portugal before. They just beat Manchester City 4-1. I know they're going to lose Amorim, but we should be hopeful of beating them. Monaco, again, at home, going well in France, but we should be strong enough to beat them. We've got Dinamo Zagreb at home, Girona away, who have really struggled this season. So I don't think it's terminal. This is not a terminal defeat that kind of pushes us even further down. It's just as part of the context of this recent run, it sucks. Yeah. But in terms of the Champions League in isolation, it doesn't feel fatal to me anyway.
And there's also the thing about the previous format was that, like, you went away from home, and if it didn't go your way, you knew you had the opportunity to get a little bit of revenge, to call it that, with the home tie, and that's not part of this current schedule or current setup. So it is a bit weird and something we're having to get our heads around. Can we go back to the first half then? After that bright Inter start, the game kind of settled down. I think Arsenal and Inter, I'm not going to say cancelled each other out, because that's not necessarily true, but it felt a bit chess-like. Neither side willing to take too many risks. The two big talking points of that first half, of course, were penalty decisions. And Mikel Arteta was not happy about both of them. Let's start with the one that was given. Handball against Mikel Merino, where I don't know what he's supposed to do with his hands. It was a cross or a free kick came in, deflected off the...
I think it was just a nothing ball in.
Yeah.
And it was flicked on by Taremi. Yeah. We spoke about the one we got at Shakhtar, against Shakhtar.
Yeah, no, I don't think that should have been a penalty either.
Yeah.
I know people
soft.
say these are consistent in Europe. They give them in the Champions League. Can we not ask why? Can we not ask why penalties are given for something that is absolutely not deliberate? And I know that's not part of the handball rule at this moment in time. But if I'm standing 2 feet away, if I'm marking you in the box and the ball comes in and it flicks off you and hits my arm and I'm like 12 inches away from you, how on earth can that be a penalty? It really should not be a penalty. Whether they're consistently given in Europe or not, I think it's an absolute bullshit reason or a penalty award. I don't think those should be penalties for us. I don't think there should be penalties for the opposition.
Completely agreed. I know that this is the rule and the threshold is lower and all of this stuff, and they are consistently giving them for handball, but penalties are the best chance you will have to score on a football pitch. You are completely unopposed from 12 yards out, the striker or midfielder or defender against a goalkeeper. You have a basically 80-85% chance to score that goal. So why are we giving them for situations that are not worthy of the crime? It just seems crazy to me. There was no advantage gained. There wasn't an attempt to make his body bigger. He's just trying to be around Taremi. And from less than a yard away, the ball is booted onto his arm. I'm sorry. It's just, the rule needs to be changed. This cannot continue, because then you'd have to give 2 or 3 per game.
Yeah.
It's just nonsense. Mikel Merino in that moment was penalised for having arms.
Yeah. Nevertheless, it was given. Turkish Bruno Fernandes stepped up and scored the goal, which turned out to be the only goal of the game. But Mikel Arteta was unhappy about the fact that Arsenal weren't awarded a penalty themselves when Jan Sommer fisted Merino right in his face. 2 fists at that. Didn't seem to get the ball. They were talking about it on TV where, like on their monitor, there's a little light comes on if VAR is going to check, and another light comes on if the game is being delayed because of VAR. And they were saying, well, the second light is on, and then they went, check cleared. Do you have sympathy for Mikel Arteta's frustration in this sense? Because basically what he said after the game was, well, the goalkeeper punched him in the face. I don't think he's wrong about that. And I think you can be... I think you can have all kinds of concerns about what we did last night, but also feel a little bit frustrated that that was not given as a penalty.
Yeah, I was certainly aggrieved in the moment not to get that. I think there is a slight touch on the ball from Jan Sommer. I think they showed it in a couple of the slow motion replays on TV. But Merino gets to the ball first, and he's the one heading the ball towards goal, and Sommer just comes and cleans him out. Yeah. And I don't know why there's this other sort of consideration when it comes to goalkeepers and what they are allowed to do, what they aren't allowed to do. They are certainly overprotected from a defensive point of view. And this was him being the aggressor in that situation, and he missed the ball. Yeah. I thought that should have been a penalty. I don't know why it's not considered the same as a defender mistiming a tackle, for example. Yeah, one of those ones, where, when there's a bouncing ball in the box and a defender is about to whack it clear and the attacker nicks in, let's say, and just gets a touch on the ball. The defender, in the action of trying to clear the ball, then kicks the bottom of the attacker's foot. And you see those given as a penalty every single time. This is basically the goalkeeping equivalent of that. Yeah, similar to the one we conceded away at Spurs. I think it was Declan Rice on Ben Davies last year or last season. But a lot of the frustration in me lies at what was given and then what was not given, because I felt like those two situations were at least equal in terms of what had happened in the context of the game, but then we are the ones that have to suffer it. I would be quite happy for neither of those to be given as penalties, but the fact that one was and one wasn't just adds another layer of distaste to the incidents, I guess. Yeah, and look, that's what it took for Inter to win this game, was a contentious penalty. That was the difference. It wasn't that we were played off the park by Inter. It wasn't that they had chance after chance after chance after chance. It wasn't that David Raya was making save after save after save. And this is where I'm as frustrated as anybody that we lost. I'm as frustrated as anybody that we're not scoring goals. I acknowledge that there are problems with our attack that really badly, quickly need to be fixed. But in this game, I think we were a little bit unlucky. That penalty that we didn't get, the penalty that they got. Gabriel's header cleared off the line. How many times do you see those just sort of flick and go in? Sommer made a good save. It was a curler from Havertz going into the top corner, and Sommer made a good save. And then I think the chance that Havertz had, it could have been a cross from Jesus. Pavard took a swing at it, missed the ball completely. Havertz took a touch, fired it towards goal. Instinctive centre-forward play. I don't think there's anything more Havertz can do. The defender got across, flicked off the underside of his leg. Another day that just goes inside the post rather than drifting beyond the post. And, we're talking about things being a little bit different, and they are fine margins. And we do have problems, but there are fine margins when it comes to results like this, particularly away from home in Europe. Yeah. Again, I can't argue or disagree with anything that you've said. They were fine margins. And like you said, we don't seem to be getting the rub of the green at the moment. It just feels like when you are in this kind of run or funk or slump, something needs to go your way, and it's just not. And whether that changes on Sunday, I really hope it does. But we aren't getting the bounces at the moment. The decisions are not really falling for us. A couple of things in front of goal are not falling for us. And like you said, that deflection from the defender, yes, he does well to throw his body at it, but that can go anywhere. That can go anywhere. And on another day, it just bobbles into the bottom corner, and we're talking about a hard fought or well-earned point. But you speak about the margins again. It does feel like we leave a lot to those margins.
Yeah, that's a fair point. That's a fair point. Yeah,
games can be 0-0, 1-0, 2-1. We can talk about decisions that did or didn't go our way. We can talk about chances that could have gone another way. But again, in this moment, it kind of feels like when Mikel Arteta spoke about the Martinelli chance away at Bournemouth. Yes, he probably should have scored it, but that was the only thing we created in the whole game. So,
well, I mean, that was with 10 men, in fairness.
Yes.
I know what you mean. I do think there is an element of that being the nature of top-level football, particularly when two teams are very evenly matched, that you have to be clinical. And this, I think, goes to the idea of improving what we've got in the squad, where, I don't think it's realistic to go to Inter Milan away from home and expect Arsenal to have 5, 6, 7 clear-cut opportunities on goal. I think what you're going to have maybe are the 2 or 3 that we had last night, 2 or 3 decent ones. The Havertz one was a decent chance. I think the Gabriel one was a decent chance. Maybe we could have done a bit better with a couple of the corners. Maybe we could have done a bit better with a couple of the crosses, the many crosses that we put in. But you're not going to go there and, have dozens of shots. So it's not, you are going to have to master those fine margins, right? Rather than say, okay, it is a problem that the margins are fine. Yes. But the way to solve that problem, I don't think, is to go with the mindset that we're going to have, handfuls of chances against teams like Inter Milan. It's about building the squad in a way which gives you the ability to take one of those 2 or 3 chances, and that means better finishers. That means better chance creation. That means changing the profile of the way that you play, or changing the profile of some of the players that you're depending on right now. Does that make sense?
Yeah. All of it does. And it's good conversation, because different people will feel differently about this stuff, and it's good. And part of the worrying thing is that people have different opinions because there's no obvious answer. So you look in different areas to try and, maybe we can play these 2 in midfield, or maybe we can try another striker up front, or put someone as the sole pivot. There's so much to think about and to change tactically to try and get us out of this slump. Can I ask you about Mikel Merino? Because he was a discussion point among Arsenal fans yesterday. And has been over the last couple of weeks, I think, even between us during the game we were doing the match report and the live blog. You said he looks a bit short at the moment, or not quite at the level yet.
Yeah.
Do you, or how are you just assessing his introduction and performances in the team right now?
I think I don't want to go too hard on a player who hasn't had pre-season, who's only just arrived, who's only really played a handful of games at the club. When I say he's not quite at the level, I think there are things that he needs to do more quickly for Arsenal than maybe he needed to do with Real Sociedad. There was one moment yesterday in the first half where the ball was sort of coming down midway into our half, and I think he needed to deal with that ball with his head. He waited for it to come down to feet. The ball was nicked off him, and Inter had like some mild threat after that. And it's those little small things, I think, where he's not quite at the level we need him to be right now. And I think there are understandable reasons for that. I think he could turn out to be a very solid squad player. I wonder what he might be like if he's playing with Martin Odegaard in the team. I think he is a player who helps lift the level of the players around him. So again, I don't want to be too harsh, but I think in the absence of Declan Rice, in the absence of Martin Odegaard, he was an obvious pick alongside Thomas Partey, but I just think he's not quite bedded into what we need from a player in his position yet. Yeah,
it's been a really difficult start. He came in without a pre-season, got injured straight away, and now he's been kind of dropped into a struggling side, trying to understand the challenging new role as the left eight while trying to figure out his own fitness and place in the side. But you can also caveat all of those things and acknowledge that what we've seen so far hasn't been amazing. And I think you can see why it took Granit Xhaka so long to feel comfortable in this left eight role. I don't know if Kai Havertz ever felt comfortable in that position. We're asking a lot of those players. We need them to progress the ball, be comfortable receiving on the turn, win their duels, crash the box, run beyond the left winger into the half space. And he's looked short. At this moment in time, he just looks a bit unsure of what he needs to be doing and not quite fit enough yet. So, which is fine. It's completely understandable, and it doesn't need to be terminal. It's way too early to write off his Arsenal career, and I'm sure he will be a useful and important member of this squad. I just think, again, it's worth a discussion because it goes back to profiles. Yeah. And we said it all during the summer. Was this the profile we needed in our midfield, or should another one, maybe a more creative one, have been prioritised, especially after letting Smith Rowe and Vieira leave? But I think he'll be fine. And I do want to see him alongside Declan Rice and Ødegaard in a more balanced midfield three. But I think it's been quite a big jump for him in these first few weeks.
I agree. I think one other thing I noticed is that technically he doesn't look quite as assured as I thought he might. The first touch isn't always as good. Bit bobbly. And I think we've seen elements of... It's funny you mentioned Granit Xhaka, because remember when Xhaka first moved into that role, there was a little bit of... People were a little bit uncomfortable with the fact that he played backwards as much as he did. Whereas what we got from him in the end was a player who was able to receive the ball and look forwards all the time, pretty much all the time. Whereas I think with Merino, there's a slight uncertainty. And look, it takes time to build relationships. It takes time to build relationships with the players around you. You have to get to know them. They have to get to know you. He's played, 5 or 6 games for Arsenal. But I haven't been massively impressed yet. I suppose the flip side of that argument is that when you spend that money on a 28-year-old, you are expecting them to get up to speed more quickly than if you brought in, let's say, a 20-year-old or 21-year-old to come in who might need a bit more coaching. I'm not writing him off. I just haven't been... I think he's been below where I expected him to be. That's all. Even with those elements that he has had to deal with, injury and adaptation to a new country. Maybe we're being harsh. I don't know. But you asked me for my honest opinion. There's my honest opinion. I think he can improve. I think he can get better. But I think right now, when we don't have Ødegaard, I'm not saying we're carrying him, but it's another piece of the burden, if you like, and maybe go some way to explaining why the football isn't quite as fluent as we would like it to be, because we have, a player who's still learning the ropes, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. I think it's an interesting one because I was quite happy to see him come in. I think it was still a slight overpay considering his contractual situation and his standing within Europe, although he was a key player at Real Sociedad and they were no chumps when it comes to negotiations. So it's a player Arteta wanted. I think it's been a difficult introduction for him for many reasons, although I think this international break might be a useful one just to, again, sit down, take a breather, maybe come back with a couple of weeks more fitness and hopefully we can see more of his sort of natural abilities when we come back. Yeah,
I mean, he was taken off at half-time. Arteta said he wasn't concussed, but yesterday and today he was already not feeling great. After, when I looked at him, I decided to take him off because I needed him at 100%. So maybe there's something going on with him, whether he's feeling a little bit ill or he's carrying a knock or something. But obviously in the absence of Declan Rice, he was needed in that midfield. And, fingers crossed, he can improve, and fingers crossed if we need him against Chelsea on Sunday, he can play a part. Let's not forget he scored a good goal against Liverpool, which could have been enough to take 3 points for us that day. So, there's been good and bad, but I understand why there are a few little reservations about that. So, That's it, a defeat. I mean, is there anything else that strikes you from the game? Anything else from the performance? Anything else you would have liked to see, or things you didn't see that maybe stand out?
Not particularly. Could we touch on Sterling quickly? Mm-hmm. Because we haven't seen him. Do you think this is it already? Like, or is it just way too early to tell? I have to say, I've been underwhelmed.
But same. I mean, what's that thing? Holy shit, my expectation levels weren't high, but you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, my expectation levels weren't high, but holy shit, whatever it is. Yeah, it's not been brilliant, and I do think it says something that he hasn't been off the bench when we've needed goals. It says something maybe about what Arteta thinks of his physical condition, maybe. Beyond that, I don't know. I mean, I can't speculate on how hard he's working in training or his application or anything like that. I mean, I think there is and has been quality in there down the years. It's how much of that is left, how much of that is available to us. And I think it's interesting that when we need goals, Arteta hasn't used him. So he can't play on Sunday, obviously, because he would be against his parent club. He won't be in the squad for Sunday's game. So will we miss him based on what we've seen so far? No. But is it a bit of a blow that we don't have another attacking option on the bench, or who that attacking option might be? Yeah, probably. But that comes back to our discussion about building your squad and what you need to have available to you. I think if anything, the Sterling situation tells the people at the club the way that they finalised the squad this summer wasn't good enough.
Yep. I have been disappointed. I think on paper he's an option that suits us. He can play both sides. He's got a nice history in the Premier League, has shown that he can score goals, can offer us a bit off the ball, a bit of punch and zip, which I think we lack at times, those kind of incisive runs to cause issues. He can be a presence at the back post coming in off the left. And, how many times did we see him score that goal at City? But the fact that he is still not being trusted to get us back into games when we need goals is worrying for me. And I'm not ready to write him off just yet. And I think there will be times where he will contribute this season, but there's already a thought in the back of my mind that is kind of reading the tea leaves here and seeing where this one could go, which is not an amazing position to be in as we sit here on the 7th of November.
No.
But yeah, hopefully, look, football changes very quickly, right? Hopefully there can be a couple of weeks where he can impact us in the game and the team, but I am worried.
Yes, I'm worried. Well, look, we can talk a bit more about the Chelsea game later in the week over on Patreon. We'll do that. Before we go, just one final thing, and something I think we can all agree on, is that watching a Champions League game on TNT Sports with Fletch as the commentator, bringing in Rio Ferdinand into the commentary booth, eating nuts, trying to have the bants with Ali McCoist. Ali McCoist is going on, I was here, I played against Claudio Gentile in 1982, and Fletch is bantering away about, peanuts or crisps or whatever the fuck, or biscuits or some shit. It's just the worst. That was more depressing to me last night than anything else.
They were strangely complimentary of Inter as well. I mean, every time Çalhanoğlu was receiving the ball, it was like, wow, comfortable to receive it in the area.
That? Well, he's a footballer who receives the football, who passes the football to another footballer. Like, he was fine last night, Çalhanoğlu, and he is a good player. But he didn't do anything particularly spectacular or impressive last night. He was very functional, but the way they were talking about him, it was like watching fucking prime Patrick Vieira dominating a game or something. Like, what are they watching?
Yeah, I don't know. It does feel that a lot of these commentary teams have or go into games with these preconceived narratives, or they let the first 5 minutes dictate their narratives for the whole game. Gary Neville is the master of that on Sky. If someone has a dodgy moment or misplaces a pass early on, he will just use that narrative for the whole game. And most of the time, I don't even bother now. That's been kind of one of the bonuses of living abroad. I don't have to listen to a lot of this crap. Yeah. But last night, I did happen to catch the feed of TNT. But yeah, it just, they're not serious. They're not serious people. Let's bring in Rio Ferdinand. Why? What is he giving you or me or anybody in that situation? Nothing. So,
yeah. All right. Well, that just compounded our misery. The life of a football fan is a difficult one. All right. Listen, we better leave it there. As ever, Phil, thank you very much indeed.
Pleasure, man. Always nice to chat.
Thank you very much indeed to Phil, and you can find him in all the usual social media places. Now, on last week's Arsecast, we had a great interview with Martin Keown on the release of his book called On the Edge. We had a competition to win one of 2 signed copies, and the question we posed to you was, against whom did Martin make his final Arsenal appearance? The answer, of course, is Leicester City on the final day of the Invincible season. The random number generator has picked out 2 winners. They are Raymond Anderson and Nimish Nwaneri. I hope I've pronounced that in some way vaguely correctly. Well done to you two. I will be in touch with you by email and we'll get those books sent out to you. On the Edge by Martin Keown is available right now in all good bookshops, in particular your local independent bookstore. So now we lick our wounds, try and build on some of the positives that Mikel Arteta said he saw in that second half performance, in particular yesterday, as we prepare for a game against Chelsea on Sunday. It's going to be tough. We're going to have to be better. We're going to have to be more decisive, more clinical if we're going to come away from that game with 3 points, which I think are really, really important now going into an international break. The last thing we want to do is spend 2 weeks talking and thinking about everything that's not right. We need to see some of the things that we know this team is capable of, but aren't showing at this moment in time. So it's up to the manager to get a tune out of these players at Stamford Bridge on Sunday. We will look ahead to that game, as I said, in a bit more detail over on Patreon. We'll have our usual Premier League preview podcast for you there. If you would like to get on board with that, if you'd like instant access to everything that we do there, you can sign up at patreon.com/Arseblog for just $6 a month. That's just $6 a month. There's also an annual subscription as well, which gives you a 10% discount. So you can sign up annually if you would like. Again, you get instant access to everything, and stand by for more details as we get towards the festive period and people wondering, what am I going to get somebody for Christmas? Patreon is now doing gift options. We'll give you some details of that as and when we get it set up. But for now, thank you so much as always for being with us. Hope you enjoyed the show. In the meantime, take it easy and we will catch you on the next one. Until then, cheers. Bye-bye.